Welcome back to Live from Occupy City Hall. My name is Leslie Roth. I'm a member of the May 30th Alliance, and today we are going to talk about the role that literacy must play and will play in the struggle against police terrorism, mass incarceration, and racial injustice in the Winnebago County area. I think one of the most beneficial things that I personally have gained out of the occupation at City Hall is has come through my interactions and engagements with people who have come down to City Hall, whether it be because they agree with the reasons we're here, whether it be because they want to know more about the reasons that we're here, and even at times people who have come and have been opposed to the reasons that we're here, whether it's they're opposed to the methods that we're using by trying to get our message across, or the methods that we're using to try to raise awareness to the issue, or if they're just opposed to the issue itself. And one of the primary things one of the regular themes of interactions that I've had with people has been someone asking me a question that no one person could give you in a simple conversation or in an hour, even 2 hour conversation. Things that you have to be willing to take the time to read about. And it's not even simply just learning about, it's that specifically reading about these things, because I think a lot of times we take for granted the important role that literature, the important role that writing, the important role that reading plays in our everyday life. There will be people who will come up and talk about how what we need to be doing is trying to get laws changed, who don't even read a minimum of 30 minutes a day, and who believe the way to get things changed is through legislation, but they don't take the time to read legislation or take the time to learn about the vernacular and terminology that is used in legislation. One of the common questions, and I've addressed this on a previous episode, and again, a lot of the things that are talked about on one episode will carry over to other episodes and form a wider, broader conversation. But I've talked about on other episodes how people will ask me, well, what about black on black violence? Someone gets shot by the police or someone gets killed by the police, and the first rebuttal to addressing that issue is saying, well, how come you don't address black on black violence? How many people got killed in LA this weekend? Or how many people got killed in the south side of Chicago or the west side of Rockford this weekend? And again, that's not something you can relay to somebody in one conversation in an hour or in 2 hours. That is something that a person, and this is for people who, and this is a lot of times how you can figure out which people truly want answers and which people truly want to solve these issues, is that you have to be willing to go and learn about these things. You can't just be addressing black on black violence in 2022 without taking time to go back and learn about slavery, without taking time to go back and learn about Reconstruction, without taking time to go back and learn about the 1920s and the passing of Jim Crow laws and de facto segregation and de jure segregation and housing covenants, and how these different communities and the Great Migration, and how these different communities that black people moved to in the East Coast, on the West Coast, in the Midwest after fleeing from the South, how they were marginalized and disenfranchised and discriminated against within these communities and within these areas, and how resources were withheld from them, how they did begin to get jobs when wars would happen and people would be shipped overseas, that they were still the last ones hired and the first ones fired when people came back. The amount of racial tensions that has existed throughout the history of black people in this country, how often violence that was done outside of the black community and came into or violence that was perpetrated by people outside the black community that came into the black community would be unaddressed. Nobody would answer for it, and how that disillusioned black people from believing in the criminal justice system and from believing in these institutions, and all of those things that I just touched on in a 2-minute period are things that take months to understand, that take having a desire to understand, and that take reading to understand. You have to read about de facto segregation and de jure segregation. You have to read about Reconstruction. You have to read about, and we didn't even get into the mass incarceration and the prison industrial complex and 3 strike laws and and all of these different political or electoral politic games that have been in the background of black people's lives. People talk about, well, I had somebody recently say to me, well, we're asking for more police, or we're asking for our communities to be safer, or for people to protect our communities. And, they're talking about presently. And so, we can't be, and I don't know, I don't want to put a intention onto the person's words, but how I took it is that, well, we have violence in our community, in black communities. We want to be protected from the violence from the black communities. The police are supposed to be protecting us from the violence. So how can we be opposed to the police if that's what we're asking for? And again, that's a conversation that cannot be picked up in 2022, because for decades, black people have not only asked for protection in communities, they've asked for better education, better resources for mental health, better resources for physical health. They've asked for better neighborhoods, and the only thing that they've ever been given has been more money to policing, has been more money to the prison industrial complex. And there had that money that is funneled to policing and funneled to the prison industrial complex does not eventually flow down to the masses of black people. And that's very similar to multiple different waves and cycles that have happened in American history, where an institution will begin to divert resources or divert finances from the American people, and black people will be included within that, and black people never get any trickle-down effect from that. They talk about that when World War II was over and people were coming back over and they started building the suburbs and they started building all these different housing complexes, and housing was a big deal, that they were a big issue that was being addressed. And I hope I don't got the wrong word. And, I still need to read. I'm still reading more too, so I can retain all this information. But my point is, they were building all of these homes, building all of these houses. People were getting jobs in construction, and black people were not getting any of these jobs. And black people weren't allowed to move into any of these houses. And so you have the same thing when this country was expanding westward. Immigrants from overseas were being given plots of land. Black people weren't being given those things. As a matter of fact, the land that they had been given initially after the Civil War, they were having that taken back from them, and it was given back to slaveholders, and they were being funneled into the sharecropping system. I think there's an importance as well in understanding why so many people don't read regularly, or so many people don't see an importance in reading. And specifically when you talk about black people in the United States of America, there's a historical reference of trauma that is directly associated with reading and with being literate. And I don't think that those things can be divorced from each other. I think one of the things that happens far too often is that we want to separate ourselves from past events that have happened in an effort to, I guess, be a part of mainstream America, a part of American society. And that's something that has always been a very thin line. There's a very thin line between integration and a surrendering of self and surrendering of culture. There's a very thin line between working for an institution that's rooted in racism and becoming an instrument of an institution that's rooted in racism. And it's not for me to say where any other person's line is at. I can only say, for me, where the line is drawn at and where I can't go, where I don't feel comfortable going further and going past. But one of the reasons a lot of people can't even see the line, or aren't even conscious of the thin line, is because they don't read. because they haven't read, because maybe they read to get through school or to get through whatever courses that they were trying to take in college, but now that they're done with that, they have no desire, feel no importance in reading. And I think that a lot of times you can come off as judgmental when you say something like this to somebody. Somebody has a long day, and that last thing they want to do is sit down and read. And that's why if you listen to music, you can replace listening to music with the audiobook. It's one of the things that I've had to do as time has passed on. There's certain days where I don't have the time to sit down and read something, but I try to make sure that whether it's from me reading something or me listening to something, that every day I'm receiving and retaining new information, and not just random information that doesn't directly connect to my reality or to everyday life, but information that can evolve my consciousness, and that can grow my consciousness, and that can help me in an effort towards progression. Another aspect of understanding the struggle that the May 30th Alliance is engaging in Rockford, Illinois, and in Winnebago County specifically, and the greater universal worldwide struggle that is going on towards a more just society, towards a less oppressive, less exploitative, less imperialistic, capitalistic society, is one that you can't really grasp without reading, without having seen, or without having taken in all of these collective thoughts that have been developing for centuries upon centuries. And it's very similar to watching a movie or watching a TV show. You can't come in season 3 of me watching a TV show and start trying to ask me questions as the TV show is going on while you trying to catch up. You got to go find time to watch season 1 and season 2, and then when you get to season 3, you'll understand the things that that I'm watching and witnessing right now. But to think that I will be able to adequately explain to you something that I've been watching and digesting for 2 seasons before this, and 60-minute episodes and 10-episode seasons, and a few short questions, is insanity. And the same thing for a movie. If you come into a movie theater halfway through the movie and you're trying to ask me questions about who's the love interest and who's the protagonist and who's the antagonist, I'm not going to be able to adequately understand the movie from this point forward myself, and watch the movie myself, and explain to you everything that's happening. You have to take the time to go back and become informed on your own by watching the movie from the beginning. And not to use a played out analogy, but in the movie of life, in the TV show of life, in the TV show of this universe, movie of this universe, TV show of this country, movie of this country, however you want to put it, same thing for the city. It just becomes smaller and smaller versions of what we're talking about. You have to take time to find out about season 1 and season 2. And the only way to do that is through reading. You have to take time to find out about the beginning half of the movie. The only way to do that is through reading. To understand what's going on in 2022 in Rockford, Illinois, you have to take time to read about what happened in 2002 and in 1992 and in 1982, and then eventually once you read those things, and again further and further back, and once you read those things, you have to find out about what was going on outside of here as well, and the implications that it had on what was going on within here. And these are all things that you have to become committed to doing. And these are small things to become committed to. Somebody reading 30 minutes every day is a small thing to become committed to. Somebody reading for an hour every day is a small thing to become committed to. Somebody listening to audiobooks and listening to less music is a small thing to become committed to. So having conversations about the things that you're reading with people that you're close to, and to loved ones and to children, is a small thing to commit to. And as you commit to these small things, you'll begin to see a heightening of your consciousness. You'll begin to see a deepening of your thought pattern, and you'll begin to see substance exist in these conversations. You'll begin to see the veil be lifted from your everyday life experience, and instead of falling into the same traps and not being able to see these thin lines that exist, you'll be able to see those things, and you'll be able to avoid those things. Before we end this episode, I want to give 11 different pieces of literature that I would recommend everybody go out and read, and that are great starting points into the struggle against police terrorism, mass incarceration, and racial injustice. And each one of these books that I'm going to list tackle different subjects and different perspectives, but they all give you a beginning or a beginner's understanding of the importance of these issues and just how deeply rooted these issues are in our everyday life, and read collectively within each other. And it really helps to lay out a guideline or a curriculum to understanding these issues and the complexity of these issues. And then even within a lot of these books, there are other books and other authors that are mentioned. And, even just by looking up these books or reading these books, how phones work and how life works, is you'll begin to attract other books and other writings that coincide with these. So, and I want to also say that these aren't just random things that I'm listing. I've read these books. The May 30th Alliance collectively have videos that are on YouTube and on Facebook, but are from last year, where we did an event where for 24 hours we would read a different book, different members of the May 30th Alliance, different members of the community. While we were reading those books, we would talk about some of the relevancies that the information in the books have with the struggle against police terrorism, mass incarceration, and racial injustice in Winnebago County. And so if you want to go back and look at those as reference points, you can do that as well. Some of these books I've also read as part of the Rockford Reading Daily podcast, and that is where the Rockford Reading Daily podcast originated from. It's from us conducting the ongoing Teaching to Say Their Name Square, me seeing some of the reaction that people in the community were having towards the readings. We began to regularly film readings after that, and I began to believe that not only was it important for me to be able to commit to reading on a regular basis and commit to retaining the information I was reading on a regular basis, commit to being able to articulate how the information I was reading and retaining directly connects to the issues of police terrorism, mass incarceration in Winnebago County, and mass incarceration and racial injustice in Winnebago County. But it also was important for people on the opposite side, or I say opposite side, it's also important for people who are following along with the May 30th Alliance to have the opportunity and the access to take in this information. Even if they didn't have the opportunity or the time to read, maybe they had the time or the opportunity to listen. And it could be something that would, have posterity. You could always go back and listen to it later on. And so these were some of the thought patterns when I began doing the Rockford Reading Daily podcast series. And we're coming up on almost a year of doing that podcast series. And we've had some ebbs and flows where there were episodes that didn't come out on a daily basis. And we've gotten to a very good groove now where we have a couple of books pre-recorded. Episodes come out every day at 8 o'clock a.m. I've gotten into a very comfortable spot with reading something and then being able to communicate about the things that I've read and how the things connect with the issues that we're talking about. And so I would encourage people to also go listen to the Rockford Reading Daily podcast series every day, 8 o'clock a.m., Spotify, Apple Podcasts. And we still upload videos on YouTube and Facebook. And very shortly here, we will be caught up and with back episodes on YouTube and Facebook. And then every day at 8 o'clock a.m., new episodes will pop up on YouTube and Facebook as well. But I'm going to close this episode out by reading these 11 books that I'm recommending to people. The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander. The End of Policing by Alex Vitale. Rise of the Warrior Cop by Radley Belko. Locking Up Our Own by James Foreman Jr., I believe. They Can't Kill Us All by Wesley Lowry. Color of Law, and I can't remember the author of Color of Law. Until We Reckon, don't remember the author of Until We Reckon. Asada by Asada Shakur. Cast by Isabella Wilkerson, I believe is her name. Then A Peculiar Indifference by Elliot Curry, which is also a book that we're going to start reading for these Rockford Reading Daily visuals that'll be coming soon. And Women, Race, and Class by Angela Wide Davis. And so those are all books that I would recommend people to go out and read. Multiple of those books we have read ourselves as part of the May 30th Alliance, whether through the Rockford Reading Daily podcast series or during the ongoing Teaching to Say Their Name Square.